Okay, so we're all very much on the same page with Get Carter then, but from hints that we've had throughout the evening, I suspect that may not be the case with the next film. So let's move on, shall we? For a long time, I associated Bob Hoskins only with Mermaids, Super Mario Brothers, EGADS, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and mostly, due no doubt to the ubiquity, British Telecom's It's Good to Talk adverts. Did you know where I was going with that, Craig? Sounds like you did.
I've got a little blue gas flame coming from my thumb as we speak.
Oh, I had a feeling it was in British Gas adverts as well, but I couldn't remember for certain. I knew it was in the It's Good to Talk BT ones.
Oh, yes. No, sorry. I was off. I wasn't even paying attention to it. Yeah, in my head, I was just, you were talking about British Gas. Don't you just love being in control?
Yeah, I can picture that quite clearly now. The wee blue flame sitting on top of his thumb like a lighter. Yeah,
Yeah, that's it.
After those, it was Shane Meadows' excellent 1997 film 24/7.
Which you introduced me to, Drew. Thank you very much. We watched that round at yours, as I recall.
Sounds about right. Mm-hmm. And an affectionate send-up by Adam Buxton and Joe Cornish as old Bobo Hoskins, Scruffle Me Nuts. He's off to Stepney to aggle his brush. The one thing I never associated him with was being a gangster in what is considered to be one of the seminal British crime films. Therefore, having thus far avoided seeing John Frenzy Mackenzie's The Long Good Friday, or indeed knowing a single thing about it, I was excited to see it. Hoskins Harold Shand is a proper East End gangster who, in Thatcher's Britain, dreams of himself as a great property mogul and tycoon, ready to make a killing when the Olympics come to London in 1988. The Olympic Games that year were, of course, in Seoul, so I'm not sure how that was going to work, but perhaps London was the favourite for the award at the time. To do this, he needs crooked politicians, which he has, and investment, which he has not. To this end, he invites a mafia boss, Alphaville's Eddie Constantine, from New York to the UK capital for a deal. Despite Shand's efforts to keep the meeting secret, though, it seems someone is aware, as a number of Shand's employees and businesses are targeted with bombs and a stabbing in an apparent effort to disrupt his dealings. Eager to keep the mafia in the dark so as not to jeopardise the deal, though they find out anyway as they're apparently clairvoyant, Shand instructs his goons to turn over the manor and bring in every likely suspect that may have dared challenge him. It never occurs to him, nor the audience, and why would it? It's stupid, that his unexpected enemy is the IRA, who blame him for a number of their members being killed by the police on the same night that one of Shand's employees delivered money to them in Belfast. Warned against confronting the IRA, Shand nevertheless attempts to deal with them, leaving us the rather unsatisfying prospect of the film ending with either the gangsters winning or the IRA winning, and goes with the worst option. Gangster films are always a difficult sell. The characters are not good people. We shouldn't want them to succeed. We shouldn't be invested in them. Therefore, we have to be given compelling reason to do so, and that's often the charisma of the main actor. Witness the very lengthy discussion we just had about Get Carter. And in The Long Good Friday, I started off quite prepared to engage with Bob Hoskins' Harold Shand. But more or less right from the start, Shand, and several other characters, are casually and unnecessarily, it adding nothing to the story nor the character, racist and homophobic, and I checked out. Now, given that our heroes are gangsters, their bigotry ought to come quite far down the list of concerns, certainly far after our murderers, but for me it killed all interest in them. Here may be a good place to mention the related illustrated fact that the film's original name was The Paddy Factor.
I was hoping someone would bring that up. There's nothing racist about that.
No, not at all. All of that rendered me pretty detached for the whole film, leaving me instead...
Paddy Factor, Sorry, I spent a good 5 minutes laughing about that earlier today and then quietly forgot about it again, and then you brought it up, which I'm glad you did. Sorry, Drew.
And I'm just imagining that being a game show introduced by Gordon Burns, just like set in Ireland.
It's just the notion of like Harold Shand knocking about going, there's something we've forgotten here, lads. Something we've not thought about. And then someone just goes, you know what you've forgotten, governor? You've forgotten the Paddy Factor. Where is the Paddy Factor?
Well, knick knack, paddy whack. Whack those paddies.
Paddy whack would have been even better. The paddy whack. Where is the paddy factor? Sorry, it's just such an obviously shockingly bad title for this. Oh, Dave. Sorry, Drew.
No, you're quite welcome. It's quite not quite welcome. Quite. Oh, you're welcome to speak. That's fine, but no problem. All of that, though, rendered me pretty detached from the whole film, leaving me instead focusing dispassionately on its technical merits, which are fine, and its story, which is poor, and wondering why this film has the reputation that it does, given that I was thoroughly underwhelmed by it. Old Bobo himself is pretty good. It's hard to imagine how the original producers, ITC Films, thought that dubbing Hoskins with a Wolverhampton accent was a good idea. And his chemistry with Helen Mirren as his girlfriend Victoria is likewise good. Though that does bring me to one of the greatest disappointments. Originally written as a more typical gangster's moll, Mirren pressed for a rewrite to make Victoria a smarter, more capable character, and Victoria's intelligence, assuredness and savvy make her more of a foil and partner for Shand, but she's still not given a great deal of agency. This genre in particular tends to be a sausage fest, but Helen Mirren has a formidable screen presence. And I got to the end of The Long Good Friday wishing that it had been a film that starred her as a gangland boss instead.
Drew, I've made a note here, sorry to interrupt, but I've made a note here of the fact that Helen Mirren, again, yes, like having her character punched up, but you still have the distinct impression that she is still shifted down at least one gear, if not two, so that everybody else can keep up with her.
Yeah. I want to see Helen Mirren as a gangland boss. I think she would be fantastic.
Yeah, 100%.
Not that would have solved the film's greatest ill, in that the story is not engaging. For about the first half, I was mildly interested by the mystery of who was attacking Shand, but the unveiling of Charlie from Casualty, because Lisa tonight is largely referring to people as their iconic characters rather than their actors' names. Charlie from Casualty as the traitor was pretty easily guessable from the start, and the introduction of the IRA was, frankly, baffling. 21st best British film of all time? What a palaver. Fiddle me nips. Smack me behind for just 2 and 6.
You're having a bloody laugh, ain't ya?
A bit of a disappointment, this one. And I'm not sure I've got all that much more to add about.
Maybe we're not on different pages then, that's good.
No, I mean, I think what I mentioned in the intro, it does seem some of the 80s somewhat, and it's definitely going for that kind of Thatcherian spiv-like entrepreneurial spirit. If you'd made this film a few years later, you would just be doing the same thing, but without the gangsters. Just have them as being property developers who would be expected to be just as corrupt as these guys are. But no, I've got a lot of the same problems. I quite like Bob Hoskins in this for the most part. Same with Helen Mirren, definitely, as you say, a better character and a better actor. I was, for the most part, buying Bob Hoskins, even though it is surely the most parodied aspect. I mean, this film at this point feels like a parody of itself just because so many other films have made parodies of this, like Guy Ritchie's entire career for the most part.
And also, just talking of Guy Ritchie, Scott, before you go on, it's like I was particularly aware of the fact that Ack You Up the Natchet Airy from Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels and Bricktop from... well, he's in Lock, Stock as well, but Alan Ford, Bricktop from Snatch was in there. Like, he's clearly influenced Guy Ritchie a lot, although Guy Ritchie's films are considerably better.
Absolutely. More capers than this one. Rob, I just couldn't... I was taking him seriously for the most part. I wasn't as bothered by the kind of more woke aspects of, or anti-woke aspects of the character. I mean, he's a gangster. I don't really expect him to be a enlightened, accepting person. I didn't mind that so much. What I did mind was the fact that you're building up your entire film on the premise that he's this clever, savvy gangster who knows the area, knows all this character, he knows what's happening, he knows what's going on with everything, he controls London, and then he kills 2 IRA members and then, well, that's me solved the IRA problem then. There's no more of them around.
The British military, someone even alludes to the fact, like, listen, the British military have been grappling with this for decades, mate. Why do you think you can mop it up in 5 minutes?
It's the traitor right before... I was watching the making of this, and they're talking about how they had that Harold Shand accidentally kills Charlie from Casualty. Like, accidentally broke
Yeah.
a bottle in half and repeatedly accidentally stabbed him in the throat.
I watched that same
it's right
making of
before.
today and had the same thought about that, Drew. Yes.
That was a ridiculous thing to say, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's right before that scene that Charlie from Casualty, and how the name you will ever forever be known by, Charlie from Casualty, had said, like, yeah, the British Army have been running from them in Belfast for 10 years and they haven't dealt with them. What are you going to do?
So
Sorry, Scott, we've both very much interrupted you. My apologies.
Sorry,
So
Scott.
that is it's one of the major points where like his character just like falls off the rails. It's like, well, that's just silly. And the same thing with Helen Mirren's character to the point, who's like calm, composed for all of it, and then at one point Bob Hoskins shouts at her and she starts crying. It's like that does not fit in with anything like the rest of your character.
No, I thought that was incredibly out of character because she's so composed up to that
Yeah.
point. And I'll even believe, why is it like he doesn't hit her, but he kind of pushes her down, and you clearly he's not that sort of gangster. He's not like a wife beater or anything, and they don't have that sort of relationship. So that if he checks himself like, oh, this has all really gotten to me, fine. But the fact she's in floods of tears after that, it doesn't match with anything else.
Comes from out of nowhere, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And there's a few things in this film. That's very much my criticism of this film is a lot of it just comes out of nowhere. The whole
Like the IRA.
Yeah, the IRA thing. I mean, I can see it does make for like an interesting enough hook to drag you through because you don't know who these characters are in the first place. You don't know why these characters are. You don't even know where, if I remember rightly, where this guy's going in the first place to hand over the cash that kind of kicks this whole thing off.
Yeah, it's not obvious that's Belfast.
Yeah, and that's fine, but the answer of it being diarrhea is just weird because it's not a gangster thing and it doesn't make a lot of sense, really. If you had some other answer rather than the IRA, although of course then you couldn't call it the Paddy factor, but then if you did, this would probably be a stronger film for me because if it was
If you just
some
made it
alternate
another
gang. Yeah. If it was actually the Yardies that he thought it was in the first place or something like that, then I could buy into it more, but it's just weird. It's almost as though you're just bringing out the IRA as boogeymen for some reason because that's what we were doing at the time. But it doesn't make any sense with them. It doesn't make any sense with what we know about them now. It's not just crazy. Yeah.
What a weird thing to do politically, though, too. I mean, at the time, people were suggesting that they were being sympathetic to the IRA or putting like a glamorising them. The film absolutely doesn't do that. So
No.
but the fact that
Although
in
let's be
1980, they wanted
let's be honest that Pierce Brosnan has given off big dick energy in this film. Pierce Brosnan is like, yeah, he's hot. I get it.
old Bronholm in his first film role. But the fact that they had the IRA at all in 1980, that's like, unless you have something really serious to say, why would you
Just don't go near it. Don't go near it. Yeah. 100%.
I mean, I remember being
weird.
I remember being quite iffy about that film a few years ago. Another Bronholm film, wasn't it? Where they're kind of leaning into the whole kind of IRA. Was it the
Foreigner?
The Foreigner, yeah.
With Jackie Chan.
If anything, that felt too soon. But too soon
we
while it's actually going on is another level entirely. Yeah.
We had some serious concerns about that film.
I haven't seen that, but I have seen The Devil's Own. With Brad Pitt and Harrison Ford. I'm not going back, Tom.
We have seen Patriot Games as well.
Oh, good grief. Well, at least the IRA were still vaguely portrayed as bad guys in that.
Yeah.
Sorry,
so
Scott.
yeah, no, that's about all I've got to say. It's a bit of a disappointment. I don't think I hated it as much as you seem to, Drew, but I definitely
No, I didn't
get
hate
a
it at all.
lot from
Not
it.
close. I was just disappointed.
Yeah.
I actually enjoyed Bob Hoskins. Buying Bob Hoskins in that role was never the problem. I thought he was actually really pretty good.
But,
It's the whole film was just kind of meh. It wasn't. I didn't hate it by any means.
there is perhaps one thing I take a bit of issue with. When you said this looked technically fine, I thought this looked a bit television-y. It didn't look
That's
great
because
to
it
me.
was originally intended for TV, as I understand it.
No, it wasn't. It was originally intended as film, but ITC decided to cut it down from nearly 2 hours to 87 or 83 minutes and put it on TV because they didn't think it would sell.
Got you.
And that's when they overdubbed Bob Hoskins. Of all people, Bob Hoskins with a Wolverhampton accent.
That clears things up.
And that's when they took them to court and ended up Eric Idle and Handmade Films bought
Stepping
it.
in and bought it for 800 grand or something, wasn't it?
Got a cinema release, no, it wasn't.
So
Weirdly you say that, Scott. I actually thought at the time, and I don't know if it's just maybe the editing and the making of changed, because I got to the end of it and thought, I don't really remember any particularly impressive shots in it. I didn't, and then I watched the making of this morning.
The car bomb thing.
They showed they showed lots of bits. Even like the shot of him in the shower and stuff, and the bit that and the burning of the clothes. Which during them watching the film, I thought that doesn't look interesting at all. During the making of, I thought I quite like that shot. So I don't know how I've been persuaded, but it seems like it's like edited version of the edited film.
I presume it's some kind of subliminal messaging that's warped your perception, because most of those scenes didn't seem particularly interesting to me. I remember seeing one shot looked vaguely interesting. I remember some scene in Reflection when he was in the boat at one point, and that was the one shot that looked, oh, someone's actually composed that. Other than that, it felt a lot like people.
Is that when he's talking to Charlie from Casualty, and you can see his reflection in the glass?
Yes, and that seemed to be the only shot that was composed. The rest of it was more like just people pointing cameras at people.
Well, there's the interesting angle where the cameraman has been strung upside down on a meat hook with the camera, so that you get the perspective of the guys getting slung into the abattoir. Here's the thing. So I'm forgetting that I was the only one who'd actually seen this ahead of time, and we spoke previously about this when we were deciding on this podcast, didn't we? About the fact that I'd found it underwhelming, and I would be interested to revisit it again, because as Drew brought up, this is frequently cited as not just one of the best gangster movies, but one of the best British movies. And like you say, Drew, whatever thing it was in, Sight and Sound or Empire or whatever, and it's rated as like...
I think it was 19th best British film in an Empire poll, and the BFI did
21st in the BFI,
best British film.
So I'm like, okay, cool, I'm willing to go back to this and see if I was wrong, because my first impression of this film, whenever I watched it for the first time, which would only have been about 5 or 6 years ago, probably, I say that, it's probably more like 10 actually, was that I was underwhelmed by it as well, and I was very much in alignment with what you're saying. I actually enjoyed it a lot more this time, but I think I'm enjoying it a lot more in the context of a lot of things that are going on around me. So I don't have anything great to say that will enlighten things more than you've already said. I will in a minute read through just the notes that I made as I was watching it this time, and I'll just read through them sequentially. The thing that I have the biggest problem with, I think, potentially, is that for all that Bob Hoskins can be convincing in the moment, his character still just gives off the vibe of being like that uncle who was the first one to sort of give you a drink and tell your mum, shut up, he's old enough, let the boy have a drink. And then he's
a bit too cheeky chappy at times, I guess.
Yeah, and then he's just like the avuncular uncle, and then he'd give you 10 quid to go to the shop and buy sweets or something, and ask you to get him a packet of fags while he was there, right? So there's that. But then I also sat back and I thought about that afterwards, and I thought, well, is that not what's great about British gangster scene? And is that probably not actually more realistic? Because everything we do in this country is crap anyway. We can't even do gangsters properly, and the truth of gangsters is probably not the whole Essex boys riding about with shotguns and everybody having a shooter, which is completely an impractical notion in this country even today, never mind 40 years ago. Is it probably not just a case that is the reality of probably what it was, that most of these people were just like affable uncles who also just happened to stab people now and again?
It's very possible. I mean, Bob Hoskins himself grew up around some of those types of people in East End, so I assume he's got something to like base his performance on there.
He must do, and I know that again from, I can't remember if it was that making of documentary that we watched through, or if it was just in reading about the film the other day as well, that I think enough comments were made by actual gangsters saying about how close to the truth it felt for them, and how much they recognised the characters they saw on screen in this movie. It probably speaks to something, and I think it does, and it ties into one of the comments I've made further down this list. But I'm just going to read this list to you now. And the first point that I've written down is, don't remember opening with ABBA Do Taffin soundtrack. And I know Taffin came 8 years later, but I was really surprised to find that the composer for this was not the same guy who composed the music for Taffin. I thought there was going to be this crazy Bronholm link, but there really isn't.
Yes, I had forgotten up until this moment. Thanks for reminding me. This soundtrack's awful. Oh, I hated it.
100% out of place. 120% out of place.
Yeah, it's the bit, especially when Bob Hoskins arrives at Heathrow and the music that's playing is like, this isn't the gangster music, it's circus music nearly. This
guy has worked with Al Stewart amongst other musical acts before. When I think about Al Stewart, I'm like, oh right, okay, now the saxophone stuff makes sense. I totally get that. I don't get it in the context of a gangster movie.
Also, I thought, just talking about the soundtrack, that terrible synth-based soundtrack that's there for most of the films, like, no, this is awful, and then saxophones appeared, like, wow, it got worse. I've made my comments about saxophones clear, but my feelings about saxophone clear before.
All of a sudden, all of a sudden, there's like jaunty saxophone, half chase movie music pops up. I've also written down in the Guinness Book of World Records as the grainiest film ever. I don't know that the restoration process has done this any favours, not at 1080p. If they give us a 4K transfer of it, which I don't think there is, then you might be able to appreciate the grain. But as it is, it looks like mush for most of the film.
Yeah, I didn't notice any grain.
Oh God, I did. Certain scenes, certainly.
Yeah, I didn't notice. Wasn't bothered by grain particularly.
No. Every other establishing shot in this movie appears to have been filmed from a mile away and or massively cropped because it's an advert for chromatic aberration. Then the next note I've got, Drew, you'll be pleased to hear is, oh yes, Charlie from Casualty. I forgot he was in it. Then I've put, is Paul Freeman the ultimate that dude? Because it wasn't until today that I actually bothered to look up that guy's name, the guy that plays Colin, the guy who's stabbed in the swimming pool by Hawk Brosnan.
Paul Freeman's Belloc in Raiders of the Lost Ark. He's very much not that guy.
I know, but would you have been able to name him, Drew?
Yes, I named him. I knew exactly who it was, Craig. He's also the priest in Hot Fuzz.
Yes, I know he's a priest, but that's what I mean. He's like the ultimate that guy. I didn't know his name until today when I actually bothered to look it up. Then I've put down, and I think this is one of the reasons why I think this film resonates at the moment, particularly, I've put, even Harold Shand understands the benefits of being an EU member state. That bit kind of saddened me, to be honest. The bit when he's talking about Britain's on the cusp of being this great European state because we've just joined the free market, stuff like oh God, those were the days. And how it's an advert for Thatcherism, really, but even Thatcher understood the benefits of the EU.
Yeah, Thatcher was pro-Europe.
Thanks for reminding me of that, Harold. The unexploded bomb in the casino, how casual do you want to be around £5 of explosives that you know have been deployed to kill you? When was sarsaparilla a thing in the UK?
The 2-gallon tub of it, yeah.
You know, when they go around to Errol's house, there's like, you know, the sort of...
it's like you put, it's like screen freezing.
Yeah, the 10 litre bottle of it on Errol's kitchen bunker. Yeah, exactly. That's what I've put, the kind of bottle, because I couldn't think of the proper word for that kind of bottle, and I've put the type you would get screen wash in.
Yes.
Basically like a 10 litre bottle of screen wash, except it's filled with a brand of sarsaparilla, and I can't remember what it is. It's like Dawson's or something. I looked it up. You can still buy it in Tesco's, apparently. I would assume that's a regional thing.
I noticed the container, but I didn't actually bother looking at the label. I saw that in the kitchen, but I can't believe that was a drink. It was like, I assumed that was like, antifreeze, yeah.
That must be a super London-centric thing, and I can imagine it's one of those things like Worcester sauce Walkers that you only get regionally, because I have never seen sarsaparilla in a supermarket ever. But there you go, you can still buy it in Tesco's apparently. Look it up, and the same brand as well. When Harold's heavies go out looking for information, lads, try and be discreet, aye? After he gives a long table of guns to them. And then I've actually made some more serious notes, and I've put, what this film captures really well is the sense in which British gangsterism is always going to be the Playmobil to the mafia's Lego Technic. There's the taint of faded empire and sense of ego we still have as a nation, but at the same time the acknowledgement that we are so dependent on others and so frankly crap. A Harold can't realise his ambitions of legitimacy made possible by our membership of the EU without the input of the Americans. And I think this is where things really start to resonate in a contemporary sense. I've put, more fundamentally than that, at the level of instinct, I'm just never going to be bored of well-written British gangster movies. I can listen to people saying, leave it out, Harold, on repeat for the rest of my life. I think also it's interesting, the humour too comes from a couple of directions. So Harold himself's not without a sense of humour, and I don't recall from the first viewing of it, but I know apparently it's like a really revered line, the point at which they're talking about sneaking Colin out in an ice cream van, and he says, yeah, there's a lot of dignity in that, going out like a raspberry ripple. He's not without humour himself, and another line of work, you can imagine him actually being like pretty decent company, but you've also got the sense of how pompous the whole London gangster scene is, and how these are basically adults essentially still living out playground fantasies, only now they've got knives and guns.
I just saw you're talking about the humour in the language too, Craig. The scene in the end at the Savoy when the two weirdly clairvoyant mafia guys are about to leave, and he gives that whole speech, which it's so cringeworthy. There's like how Great Britain and what Britain's given the world, not just a sodden hot dog or anything like that. It's so cringeworthy. But in the middle of that, he does have that great line about talk about a sleeping partner. You two are in a corner. That's really funny.
Yeah, he's not.
It's a pity it was in the middle of that speech.
He's fairly well written character, if I'm being fair about it. And I've said that Hoskins Shand is a quietly compelling character and closer to a favourite uncle. So I've mentioned that already, and certainly more so than the conditioned image you've probably got of a typical gangster. But in fairness, you're also left in no doubt that he's a genuinely dangerous man. Like when he's given Jeff it in the neck with a broken bottle, I'm not in doubt of that. I didn't find that jarring in the sense that where's this aspect of this character come from?
No, yeah, I never failed to buy Bob Hoskins in the role. It's there's everything around him I had the problems with.
Well, I've put that. I think his ambitions may be legitimate, but the anger's only ever just below the surface, and you can, in the sense you can take the mad lad out of the East End. So I didn't find him as unconvincing as yourself, but there is still like a layer of abstraction there where I just can't see past him being the avuncular uncle as well.
Craig, I said I was never not convinced by him.
Oh, did you? Sorry.
Yes. No, I always was convinced. It was everything around him was the problem. I had no problem with Hoskins in the role at all. And I totally bought the bit when he lost it and killed Charlie from Casualty, or refused to learn his character or his actor's name.
Because of the way he treated Duffy.
Wow, that's a blast.
Or the one time he didn't quite manage to rescue that person from underneath the train. Oh, that was a gruesome episode.
Is that not every episode?
Pretty much. I remember the bit where the houseboat blew up and there were some guys got hot tar poured on them on a building site as well. Good grief. No, I did. I think it's safe to say that I was really sort of, the first time I'd watched this, as I alluded to in the conversation that we had last week or whenever it was, that I was kind of slightly baffled by the reception of this film. Slightly less so now on a second view, and I certainly did enjoy this a lot more. But I still don't understand it as the 21st best British movie ever made. I wouldn't top 100. Oh, right, I'll sit and have a conversation with you, but I don't know that I can be bothered writing out 99 other films or even sort of thinking of what they might be. I think at that point it becomes irrelevant, but I don't think the top 20 films, British films of all time. Like I say, for me, the biggest disappointment of this film is that Helen Mirren is clearly in sort of low gear. Or mid-gear at best. And I just, like you, Drew, I hadn't actually considered it, but what would this film have been if Helen Mirren were the head of this empire? Actually, that's a much more interesting prospect for me. And if we want to go remaking films, cool. This is one that I would actually be on board with. I think you've got a good pitch there, Drew.
Yeah, it's certainly be better than the suggested sequel that was actually written for this before it was ever filmed, in that he somehow escapes from the IRA at the end of the film and then he has to deal with bad boy Yardies taking over his patch.
Yeah. Aye, he must have passed Old Kent Road and got a get out of jail free card or something like that. But yeah, I didn't dislike the Long Good Friday this time around. I enjoyed it more than my initial viewing, but I don't know that I'm going to be compelled to go back to it. I think tellingly, Drew, if I'm honest, and I would wonder if you feel the same about this, the making of was more interesting than the film to me.
Oh, vastly so. I actually really found that quite entertaining. Again, it's kind of squandered opportunity though, because I'm watching this thinking, I imagine Helen Mirren was like Helen Mirren in kind of like the level of quality performance she gives in like Prime Suspect or something like that, but on the other side of the law this time. Yeah. How good would that be, as opposed to like her sort of slight dalliances with being an East End gangster as she's Jason Statham's mum in the Fast and the Furious films? Yeah. That was completely squandered.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of Helen Mirren in a sort of day-to-day way, but I would buy a ticket to that.
I'd certainly be far more compelled to watch that than to ever watch something like The Queen again, which I hated passionately.
Dodged that one. Cool.